wanted to check in briefly with you. How does it feel to be here at the 200th anniversary?
Pretty amazing. My dad got me involved in this in 1977, and I was 4 years old. Thank you very much, and it's been fun. I mean, we've been, got actively involved with it in '95 with the generational shift and people who ran it, and it's beautiful to see it coming together for this 200th annual meeting.
Well, everyone here that we've spoken to is very excited. They're loving the meal, and they can't wait to hear our speaker.
Outstanding.
So, thanks for your time.
Well, greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
My name's Jamie, and I'm just roving around asking for opinions on how you're doing. Are you enjoying the meal? And are you members of our group?
Well, first of all, yes, I am members of the group. We're definitely enjoying the meal. Figaro's is a great host in terms of everything, and it was great, having to do a proclamation today, and so it was great. So we're having a...
I had a little dinner. I tried to keep all that meat, sausage with one piece each.
Did you eat the chicken? Can you spell chicken francais?
CHICKEN,
Oh my goodness, I thought that was going to be my stumper question. Good job. And thank you for singing. You have a lovely voice. This gentleman at the end sang our national anthem, and everybody loved it, especially me. It's just, I'm part of the committee who's interviewing to find out if everyone is enjoying their evening. Are you having a good time?
Absolutely. This is my first time here, so looking forward to see what you guys have coming up.
This is our main event of the year, our annual meeting and a dinner with a speaker. So did you happen to sign up to become a member for a whole $1?
I did.
Oh, yay. All right, well, you're going to be one of our new members and a woman. Yay, a woman. No, I'm just teasing you. So did you have any of the chicken?
No, I was just talking about it. I had sausage and peppers and meatballs.
It was good. Well, I'm just walking around asking people how they enjoyed their meal, and are you a member of the Enfield group?
Yes, I've been a member since 2006, and they always do a good meal. The Rose does a great job.
Do you happen to have a horse?
I don't have a horse, unfortunately.
That's okay. I used to have a horse, but it was a rocking horse. So, but are you an Enfield resident with us?
Yes.
Well, we're glad you're here. How many years?
For many years.
Wow. Welcome to the dinner. Are you guys members? Are you?
They just signed up tonight.
You just signed up? You're one of the newest members? It was a real expense, wasn't it?
Yeah, not good.
A whole $1. So I'm trying to just interview a few people. Did you enjoy your meal?
Yes, I do.
So why did you decide to join?
Just for my friend, and he asked me to join, so I joined it. Right. Right, yeah.
So you must be the person who convinced him to join then.
That's right. Him and my wife. Right. Yeah.
What was your favorite part of your meal?
Oh, everything was great. Yeah, Ernie does a good job.
Dessert is on its way,
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Thanks. Nice to meet you. Welcome to the dinner tonight.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
I'm just going around interviewing, asking people how they enjoyed their meal, and I'm wondering, are you a member of this group?
I am the historian. I'm the one who found all the information up there because they didn't know a thing about it. It just, ironically, what happened was Dickie Stephen conned me, as he usually did, he knew I was big into history. He said, see if you can find anything on the thieves and robbers. And I just happened to be in the museum that day, and there's a book, and Society for Thieves and Robbers. I said, didn't get any easier than that. And the original Constitution was in there. A lot of the paperwork done by Parakeelis and some of them other people were in there. So we put it all together and done business.
Were you able to enjoy the meal so far? You haven't eaten yet?
No, I just came from, my wife's up in the hospital with COVID. I just came from there,
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I hope she does well.
Yeah, me too.
But we're so thankful that you found all of that information. Were there any secrets that you haven't told us yet?
It's all in the history, and the ironic part was in order for them to go finding your horse, you had to be a member, or else they didn't look for it. And out of all the times that they were called out, they never found anybody. They found what happened was they went out on 2 occasions and they found that the individual who claimed his horse was stolen just happened to misplace it. So then they passed a rule that said, wait a minute, from now on you're going to do that, and then you're going to charge you a couple of bucks for it. So
I think that's on our program, that they, in the program, okay, well, it's in there. So if you lose your horse, you better be telling the truth. You better be a member and you better be telling the truth, or we're going to pursue you, just like we would pursue a horse, right?
Exactly.
Thank you so much for
you're
talking
quite welcome.
to us.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 200th annual meeting of the Enfield Society for the Detection of Thieves and Robbers. We have some complimentary placemats that you can do with them as you wish. Take them home. They are part of our history. The original 48 members, plus the original 25 female members who joined in 1995. There's a story there. We'll get into it later. Lots of stories tonight. Lots of stories. I'd like to call Greg Stokes up for our invocation. Please.
All right. Over the 40 years of pastoring a church, I have prayed with many thieves and robbers. This is the first time I've prayed for those who put them away. So it's good to be here.
You can speak louder.
Okay. Let's have a word of prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this day, Lord, and for the history of this organization, 200 years to be celebrated. And God, we just thank you so much for the organizers of this, Lord, and we thank you for what they put together and the food provided for our nourishment. But we also pray for the future of our nation, of our town, and of our state. We pray, Lord, that you just bless all those involved as we come up to selection. We ask the Lord's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please rise for the national anthem. It will be sung by Bill Squires, who is trying to make his way to the front here, someplace.
He's right here.
Ah, there he is. There you go, Mr. Squires. Have at it.
Dick Stevens had told me, had mentioned...
We're having a problem with it.
Okay. I'll try to boom it out as much. Yeah. Dick Stevens had mentioned to me that I should mention that my grandfather
Of course, it's in and out.
was a member of Thieves and Robbers, and my father was a member of Thieves and Robbers. Now, I don't think I look 200 years old, but sometimes I feel...
Yeah. So please. Straight ahead.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleam, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Well done. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Sorry, getting a little exercise. The flag we have here is the flag of the United States in 1823. So, please, I pledge to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now we can sit. We have, since this is the 200th, the Society has been granted some citations. I'd like to call the Mayor of Enfield up, Mr. Robert Russotto, to present the citation. Thank you, Paul.
It's quite an honor for me to be here tonight, and I greatly appreciate you invited me, and I do have a proclamation recognizing the Enfield Society for the Detection of Thieves and Robbers on its 200-year anniversary. Boy, an organization to be 200 years old is really impressive, and to see the crowd that's out here today is a tribute to your group, so thank you very much. Whereas the Society organized January 30th, 1823, is the longest continuous active organization in the country. And whereas the Society has at all times been in readiness for the pursuit of thieves and robbers who threaten those property owners in the town of Enfield. And whereas it is important to celebrate the role of history in our lives and in the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of the heritage that has shaped us as a people. And whereas the Society is celebrating its 200th year of service to the town of Enfield and vows as a society to continue such service and goodwill for the community. Now therefore, I, Bob Russotto, the Mayor of Enfield, on behalf of the Town Council, the Town Administration, and the entire community, do hereby honor the Enfield Society for the Detection of Thieves and Robbers on its 200-year anniversary. I want to thank you very much for this opportunity. Here is your proclamation, Paul.
Thank you.
And congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I just want to recognize a couple of people that are out in the crowd. My friends here on the council, John Santinella is in attendance today, so John's here, Cindy Mangini, and Gloria Ungire. If there's anybody else, I think I got everybody.
Very good.
Okay, thank you. And Representative Carol Hall, so thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, Senator Kissel has a citation for us.
From our delegation.
Of course. What do you mean? There you go. Put it right up close. Yep.
Congratulations. When I learned that you were celebrating your 200th anniversary, I was just ecstatic. All I can say is the oldest continuous vigilante group in the United States of America. Take that, Great Panthers. So our delegation had this expertly framed at the Senate Clerk's office in the Legislative Office Building, and because it's nonpartisan, bipartisan, Tom was here, it has Mufana, but I'm going to have Carol read the citation that was introduced by your entire delegation. So Carol?
Thank you for inviting me up. And thank you for everybody attending.
Of course, anytime.
Now, and congratulations on your 200th anniversary. I'm excited. It's my first time here, so I can't wait to hear the story. So I'm very, very excited. So this citation is presented from the General Assembly. It's an official citation It was submitted by Senator John Kissel, Representative Tom Arnone, and Representative Carol Hall. The Enfield Society for the Protection of Thieves and Robbers, in recognition of their 200th anniversary, founded on January 30th, 1823, when 48 men gathered at the tavern home of Peter Field, which I believe on Enfield Street on the corner of Bridge and Enfield
Correct.
Street. I actually know the flanking people there, Stevens and Cartwright own the house now, so it might give you a reference where it was. To create a mutual aid group to protect against thievery. Each member had to have a horse of a sound wind, a lifetime membership, cost $1, and that still will be today. Members must be 21 and have lived in Enfield. I think that might have changed. But, originally, male society, 55 women joined in 1995. We honor you on this oldest vigilante society in the United States. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
There you go.
Oh, there we go. There we go. These citations will become the property of the Enfield Historical Society for safekeeping. Put that one there. Town got drowned in the 1930s, the Great Quantum. What we have done in the past is we waved to the other 18 Enfields in the world. Our camera is back there, so please everybody give a big wave. Thank you. Enfield. I always thought it meant end field. You know, it's the end of Springfield. It's not. It's actually an Anglo-Saxon word, Enid Field, which means duck field. And we're just going to leave that little bit of history laying out there for you guys to figure out. I'd like to introduce our officers, which I did not do. My name is Paul Salva. I'm the president. I've been president since 2017. We have Dan Jasminski, our secretary, and Tim Keeney, who is our treasurer. We've gone very upscale technologically tonight, and without the services of Andres Fribas and Bill Lee, it would not have happened. So, thank you, gentlemen. A torrent of history has come out about the society that we just didn't know existed. In fact, we thought it was gone. And I'd like to thank Tom Heath for finding the original Constitution in back there in the Enfield Historical Society. It's beyond belief amazing. It's like the Ark of the Covenant. You open it, and there it is. I'd also like to introduce a new member to our committee of arrangements, a gentleman named Peter Sorensen, a local author and historian who's given us tremendous new information. He is an author. He's written several books. The first is Hazard Powder, the Powder Hollow Explosion of 1913, and also a book called Climax Fuse, which is about the explosive history of Ensign Bickford. This book details the importance of both the copper mining in this area and the safety fuse industries in Connecticut. His next book is titled Bucket of Blood, The Raucous History of Enfield, Connecticut. Should be interesting. And he's currently looking for people who have stories to tell about Skiddyco and Hazardville, Thompson, Enfield, the prison farm, Shaker Village, and lastly, but not least, the Thieves and Robbers. I'd also like to welcome William Friday, who is from the Enfield Historical Society, and we, like I said, we'll be giving these citations and everything to the Historical Society for safekeeping. I'd like to bring us back, let's go back 100 years. We'll be quick, don't worry. In an article in the Thompsonville Press there was a front page, multi-column article about the 100th reunion of the society. And it was held at a place called the Auditorium. No idea where that is. I think it has something to do with where the Historical Society is now, would think. We only have one speaker tonight. They had five. E.H. Parkman, who was principal of the Enfield High School. Henry Bridge, Society Secretary, who gave a history of the Society. Reverend Robert French, who was the pastor of the Enfield Congregational Church. Reverend William Downey, an Enfield resident, who was the rector of St. Thomas Seminary in then Hartford, but then moved to Bloomfield. And there are a few St. Thomas Seminary alums here in the crowd. And Father Golis is a St. Thomas Seminary alum. And then lastly, Judge Charles Fowler. They also had singing, musical entertainment, magic tricks, and the event lasted, open quote, almost to midnight. We're gonna come shy of that, don't worry. The historian named Will Durant stated, most history is guessing, the rest is prejudice. With Tom Heath's and Peter Sorensen's talents, we hope to take a lot of the mystery and guesswork out of the society. This very, very first meeting was held on January 30th, 1823, in the tavern home of Peter Field, which is at the north corner of Bridge Lane and Enfield Street. The house is still there. It was built in 1763 by Peter's father, Dr. Simeon Field. And in a phrase that when what goes around comes around, our organizational meetings for this event are now held at Powder Hollow Tavern. So we started in a tavern, and we are going back to the tavern. Women were, quote, officially allowed to become members in 1995. However, when we found the original Constitution, it stated very clearly, any resident living within the limits of the town of Enfield. And in two other places, they mentioned his or her horse. So it was very explicit that women could join in 1823. We found out in 1994. What are you going to do? So even the revised 1951 Constitution, Article 10, states, quote, in construing this Constitution, words importing the single number may extend and include the plural and vice versa, and words importing the male gender may be applied to females. This yet again is another old adage, when all else fails, read the directions, all of them. I would now like to start the formal society meeting and introduce Scott Copen for the purposes of introducing our speaker for the evening. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have the honor of introducing our guest speaker, John J. Russotto, Deputy Chief State's Attorney for the State of Connecticut, Division of Criminal Justice. John, the son of Dario and Irene Russotto, sitting right here in the front, is an Enfield native. He grew up in the North Thompsonville section of Enfield, attended Enfield Public Schools, and graduated from Enrico Fermi High School in 1983. There are several of us here this evening that have known John since those very formative years. But out of respect to who John is today, there can be no storytelling this evening. John received a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Foreign Languages from Fairfield University in 1987, and his Juris Doctor from the Boston University School of Law in 1990. John achieved his bar admission here in the state of Connecticut in 1991. John began his legal career as a litigation attorney for several Hartford-based law firms, and then joined the state of Connecticut Division of Criminal Justice as an assistant state's attorney in 1997. As the assistant state's attorney, he prosecuted public corruption,
white-collar crimes, and cold case homicides. In 2004, John was appointed by the Connecticut Criminal Justice Commission to serve as Deputy Chief State's Attorney for Personnel, Finance, and Administration. He is currently serving his 5th term in office and was appointed Acting Chief State's Attorney from December 2019 to February 2020. Deputy Chief State's Attorney Russotto is the Chief Administrative Officer and Legal Counsel to the Division of Criminal Justice, a Connecticut executive branch agency comprising over 500 employees, including nearly 250 attorneys. Can you imagine working for 250 attorneys? John's presentation this evening is titled Moving Justice Forward, the Role of the Prosecutor in the Criminal Justice System. Let's give a warm society welcome to our guest speaker, Deputy Chief State's Attorney, John Russotto.
One second. Oh, thank you. All right. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for that warm welcome. And yes, working with attorneys is a challenge, but not so much of a challenge when you've been raised by folks like this right here. I think they prepared me to deal with attorneys, judges, and anyone else that I come across, maybe a politician or two. Hello, Senator Kissel, how are you? Couple of things just up front as I'm I get back to Enfield every now and again, usually with the grandkids. And by the way, who did the seating chart for this dinner? Because how in God's name did I get to stand right here and have my dad within like arm's reach in case I get out of line? I feel like I'm going to get a smack or something. So I was thinking about the last time that I was in this hall, and this is going to go back to my 8th grade year. At St. Martha's Grammar School, if you guys remember that. And St. Bernard's, there were a lot of Catholic grammar schools back then in Enfield. I think there were 5, as a matter of fact. And we had an 8th grade dance. So we were in this room, and I can remember it vividly because all the boys were on that side, all the girls were on this side, and the Felician sisters were right down the middle. And it was, I guess, a fun night for us. But I have so many memories coming back, to Enfield, but Justice Palmer is a good friend and a good man. So I was thinking about a couple of things when putting together the PowerPoint for today's talk, and I was reminded by the board members several times to kind of keep things moving. We don't, I think the idea is to kind of get everybody in and out of here in an orderly fashion and on time. So I'm going to do my very best to get through my PowerPoint. I apologize if you're not going to be able to see some of the data that I'd like to highlight for you guys. It'll be on the screen. You might have to turn your chairs a little bit to see it. So first, make sure I get my, okay. So it is entitled Moving Justice Forward, the Prosecutor's Role in the Criminal Justice System. And I think before I really get into that thank you for indulging me, I'd like to get a little bit into the meat and potatoes of the presentation. So drawing on your 200 years of existence, I just wanted to highlight for folks, this is the criminal justice system circa 1823. And we actually found your emblem there with the stop thief, the gentleman on the horse with the pitchfork, and you can see the other riders trying to get away. And then on the picture on the upper right, that's the old Newgate prison, and then obviously the gallows, because that's what happened when you stole horses back in 1823. So that's the criminal justice system as known in 1823. I just want to give you an idea really quickly of the criminal justice system circa 2022. A little different, right? A little more complicated, a little more complex. And this is where I make my shameless plug to Senator Kissel. And this is why, Senator, we need more resources at the Division of Criminal Justice. But the senator is a big supporter of the division, so I know, we have a friend here in the audience. But it's a very complex and complicated system these days, and it really takes you from left to right, where the police are involved in responding to emergencies, investigating crimes, making arrests, and then moves on through the system with prosecutors, the courts, and then when people end up at the very end to the right in our prison system. There will be a test at the end, so please, pay attention. That slide will be coming up again shortly. Again, I'm sorry for the small print, but I really wanted to point out something very interesting. We found this. This is published in the New England Journal in 2005, and I highlighted in yellow. That is the Enfield Society for the Detection of Thieves and Robbers. And it says that it was included Enfield and Warehouse Point, established in 1796. So I think you guys might be a little bit older than the 200 years that you think you are. What also, and you're listed as still active, but the data point that I was really interested in is the one on the end. And let me just fast forward here. That column talks about incidents. And it's footnoted, and the incidents, it just says historical incidents. So I'm going to guess that that's the number of cases that the society maybe caught someone stealing a horse or otherwise stealing something. And you can see all the other towns have listed, let me try to get that back. Okay. They've listed the number of cases they actually have, all except for one. I don't know if you can see what that says there. In quotes, it says several. So I'm not really sure what that means. Either the society's not keeping really good records, or you guys don't want anyone to know how many pending cases you have. I might categorize that as what I would call maybe a cold case, because we don't know if those cases are maybe 200 years old, 100 years old, or maybe last week. So I would just ask the board to maybe take another look at the data that you're collecting. All right. So I had my crack team of researchers back at the Office of the Chief State's Attorney start looking, into the archives to find 200 years of historical data. And unfortunately, all we can do is 35 years because that's when the FBI started really keeping very good records. But I thought it would be of interest for you to know, in Enfield, robberies and thefts, otherwise known as larcenies, from 1985 to 2020. And I think you can see a definite trend here. I think that's from 1985. You can see the crime rate was fairly high, probably at its highest at that point, and then slowly and steadily declines. And the black line is showing you the number of thieves and robbers detected. In other words, arrests. And you can kind of see right at that point in time, there was a I guess it was at the high point of how many cases, how many arrests were made for robberies and larcenies, here in Enfield. And we really spent a lot of time trying to figure out why that point in time and why did it decline after that. And after coming up with a lot of different theories and dismissing them, we came up with that. So I'm not really sure what to make of this, but Dario, he was working his tail off trying to solve those cases, and really I'm not exactly sure how those cases got solved, but let's just say they were solved. And you can see that there's a high clearance rate there, but then my crack data people pointed out to me that in reality, as you look at the data, right, you see that the number of cases are going down, the clearance rate is going down, but the percent of clearance rate is actually going up. So in reality, the detectives that came into the Enfield Detective Bureau after Dario retired, I think they had a slightly higher clearance rate. I'm not sure how we explain that, or maybe we don't want to. So anyways, that was just a nice statistical anomaly that we found and we thought we would point out to this group. Now looking at total reported crime in Enfield, you can also see what I think is a very good trend, and this is the trend that we'll see in the next slide around the state. You can kind of see in the early 90s, late 80s, there was a peak in arrests and crimes in Enfield, and then it goes all the way down to sort of these COVID years right here. Now, a lot of people say to me that, well, wait a minute, we don't really feel like crime has gone down. And again, my crack squad of data analysts, they point out to me that you see this little blip right here where crime did go up a little bit, right sort of in the middle of the pandemic. That creates a sort of what is considered a bias in the person who's observing the data, because this, you don't feel like the crime is going down when you have a blip like that at the end. But trust me, over time, crime is going down. And I think that has a lot to do with our dedicated law enforcement officials and the prosecutors that I work with at the Division of Criminal Justice. So this slide kind of shows the change in total crime 1992 to 2021. And again, you see the same trend. The orange-looking line there that's shaped like a diamond, that's the change overall in Connecticut, and I believe it's minus 63%. Enfield did not quite make it to that point. Enfield is down. I think that's 49%, if I see it correctly. So, but in general, you're seeing pretty good trends from the peak of criminal activity that took place at this point in time in the early 90s. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There are demographic changes, aging population, a whole host of, again, good law enforcement practices and good solid prosecution work. Okay, a little bit about the Division of Criminal Justice. And you might think this is a map of the counties in the state of Connecticut, but in reality, it's a map of what we call judicial districts. And in each one of those judicial districts, there is a constitutional officer called a state's attorney. And that state's attorney is in charge of all criminal matters in that jurisdiction. So they are the top law enforcement official in that jurisdiction. They make decisions, they and their assistants, on everything from how to resolve traffic tickets all the way up to the most horrendous crime, murder, kidnapping, and the like. And so we're 501 employees spread out all across the state in courthouses in every one of those judicial districts. I thought this was a kind of an important slide to highlight because a lot of times, and there's a note on the bottom that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to criminal justice, which really shouldn't be in any state, but in particular in Connecticut. And you can see why when you're just looking at the shaded colors. If you look at the cluster of colored, towns, shaded towns, you'll see what I can, my unofficial theory is, you look at the major highways in the state, and you can kind of see Interstate 95 and then 91 going north, and you have, sort of the more densely populated areas, and of course in the most densely populated areas, you're going to see, more calls for service. The police are going to have to go to different emergencies. Different things happen when people live very close together. So you kind of see the pattern of criminal activity in a state like Connecticut. In contrast, you can see in the towns that are all shaded in the white color, that's where the least amount of reported crime is happening. Sorry, I just wanted to go back one slide and, yes, okay. On this particular slide, looks very similar to the first slide, but wanted to make the point that if you added up the population in the 6 orange shaded towns and cities, you're roughly about 720,000 people, roughly. And I think that's, if I can see it correctly, that's 2020 numbers. And you're talking about 35% of the reported crimes and 61% of the violent crimes coming out of those densely populated areas. In contrast, you have roughly the same amount of population, almost 720,000, in the other 93 towns that are shaded in that light color, that white color, where you're looking at a much smaller percentage of crimes committed. I think it's 5% overall and 4% of the violent crimes. So again, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution to how we deal with criminal activity in a state like Connecticut. Okay, talking a little bit how prosecutors fit into this system and the prosecutor's duty to seek justice. Of course, that begs the question, what is justice? And really it breaks down into two sort of equally important buckets. You know, we have our public safety function, but we also have a function which we refer to as fairness. And fairness includes fairness not only to society, to victims of crime, but also to those accused of crimes, to defendants. So that's really the essence of a prosecutor's duty to seek justice. And when we start to look at some of the specifics under the public safety side of the equation, of course we have our basics. We look at the seriousness of the crime, we look at the strength of the state's case, but we also take a look, more and more, we're taking a look at the background of the defendant. Certainly the defendant's criminal history, but we're taking a look at factors such as mental health, substance abuse, family instability, and socioeconomic factors. A lot of that goes into the analysis when we're looking at individual cases, and properly so. There are so many times when I talk with our prosecutors that are on the front lines, and they see every day dozens and dozens of people coming into the court where they're suffering terribly from mental health or substance abuse, and that's a big factor in driving criminal activity. So a lot of our focus, and it may be not as much as in the past as it is today, we're focusing on ways to kind of break that cycle with the intent that we don't want to see people coming back to court again and again for the same kind of activity. Of course, there's still going to be folks who do come back multiple times, but we're trying to spend some of our time and some of our resources on trying to break that cycle so that we're a more effective and a more efficient system of criminal justice. Then on the other side, we have the issues I referenced earlier on fairness, and first and foremost, our fairness to the community, to the people that live in the community. We also look at our offenders, their show of remorse, lack of remorse. And then finally, we have to take a look when we have victims, because we do have a lot of victimless crime in Connecticut, and we look at the various factors of things that victims may be looking for. Sometimes, resolution of cases, not serious cases, but more the low-level cases, comes down to a matter of someone accepting responsibility for their conduct, maybe apologizing to the victim, and if appropriate, making restitution to the victim. And that's what we're referring to these days as procedural justice. And it's a concept it's been around for decades, but I think is really starting to take hold in a lot of our entry-level courts, our geographical area courts, where we see most of our misdemeanor cases coming in the door. So a lot of people ask this question when I do this presentation. They want to know, well, who do prosecutors represent? Your guys are lawyers, don't you have a client? Well, we really don't have a client in the traditional sense, but we do represent the public interest. So what we try to do is we try to get out at events like this, and we try to get out in our communities and meet with different groups, concerned citizens, listen to what they have to say, find out what's going on in their neighborhood. You'd be surprised at some of the tough on crime folks that we see in some of the neighborhoods in our cities, because they're the ones who have to sort of suffer the consequences of whatever activity is going on at the moment, on the street corner or in their neighborhood. And I would just point out that the public interest varies, based on the nature and severity of the case. So we always have to be in touch with those that we represent. So we don't really have a client, but if we do, it's really representing the community and the public interest. All right, I kind of alluded to this and said we'd come back to this god-awful spaghetti graph diagram thing, and I just really wanted to point out this piece of that graphic, which is really where the prosecutors spend their time. And I wish my eyesight was a little better. I'll try to do this. But so the main things that the prosecutors are doing day in and day out is they're reviewing of course, the search warrants and the arrest warrants that come in on a daily basis. And in a lot of our courthouses these days, they come in, by the dozens. And it's not always just a one review and done, but it's send this back to the police, have them do some additional investigative work. It's not quite there yet. So we're not in a position, as prosecutors, we're not rubber stamping what police departments are bringing to us, but we're making sure that we're following the law, of course, and making sure that the Constitution is followed. We're also making decisions about whether or not to pursue a prosecution in a case. There are times when police officers are bringing us valid cases, there's probable cause, and we decide whether or not it's in the public interest to pursue that case. And that's kind of a big deal these days in the Division of Criminal Justice. We're spending a lot of our time and a lot of our resources training our newer prosecutors, which we have many new prosecutors these days because we had a big wave of retirements this past summer. We're really focusing on training them on how to properly evaluate a case. Because I think there isn't anything that undermines the criminal justice system more than a prosecutor with maybe a heavy hand who's maybe not evaluating a case correctly and is putting too high of a number on it. The people in the courtroom see that, it gets reported in the media, and I think it starts to erode some of the confidence that the public has in our system. So you can see as we go down the list, there are lots of things, from conducting trials, which I'll just make one point on trials these days. Currently, there are not a lot of trials going on because we're still coming out of COVID in our court system. You go into any courtroom in the state and it looks like a hockey arena. There's still that plexiglass is up. Jurors are a little skittish about sitting for cases, but we are getting back into the trial business. Ordinarily, in any given calendar year, we'll have about 300 jury trials to verdict that take place in the state of Connecticut. And when you see some of the numbers I'm going to put up in a minute, you're going to say, that's not a lot. Well, a very small percentage of cases actually go to trial. So the bulk of what prosecutors have to do is they have to evaluate cases, evaluate the evidence, evaluate what is the right thing to do with this particular defendant, and make decisions in the form of a plea bargain. Then, of course, we have our post-conviction litigation, where we have to handle everything from appeals to petitions for new trial, and the newest one on the bottom, which I think is very important, is our conviction integrity review. That is something that it's a unit we just started within the last year, and we have some of our most talented senior prosecutors and investigators in that unit, and where warranted, we're taking another look at some cases that maybe are not actual innocence cases where someone was convicted and DNA shows that they were actually innocent, but there's something in the case, maybe in the investigation or in the prosecution, and we're concerned about it, and we've lost some faith in that conviction, in that result. And so we're taking an affirmative look at it and determining whether or not we need to go into court and make that statement. So I think that's a big deal. There are several other jurisdictions in the country that are doing that. But again, it goes to the integrity of the system. I have a new boss at work, a new chief state's attorney, and he did, a couple of years ago, he and his office did, I think, an amazing, a very incredible thing, a very brave thing, and the right thing. He evaluated, before we had such a unit, he evaluated a case, horrific case, murder case. But there was enough information to cast doubt on the integrity of that conviction. And he stood up in court and he said so. And while some might say, well, that isn't justice, I think that we might take a harder look at that and really think about whether that was justice. It was a tough thing to do, but it was the right thing to do. And if it was the right thing to do, then that's the just result. And that's always what we're striving to do as prosecutors. Okay, I know this is something Senator Kissel's very interested in. Overall, well, caseloads have gone down. Why do we need the resources? Well, we need the resources, Senator, because the individual cases have become a lot more complex. And I know you know this. And we've been talking about this a lot with the legislators, mostly on the other side, because I think they need more convincing. But just to name a few things that have happened over the last 10 or 15 years, the biggest one is the digital evidence that's now, just in the form of body-worn camera videos. We are inundated with body-worn camera videos. There's a law that just came into effect this past July that requires all police departments, including the inspectors that, we have law enforcement officials that we hire in the division, they have to wear under certain circumstances body-worn cameras. And so the way I explain this to folks is that if a police officer before a body-worn camera would go to investigate a crime, they would take down information from the witnesses or the victim, put that information into a very concise 1 or 2 page report. And that's what the prosecutor would have to look at in order to make her decision whether to pursue the case or not. Now what you get is 4 or 5 police officers responding to the same report of a crime, and everything that they are, every moment of interaction with the witnesses and the victims in the crime scene is being recorded. So we're getting, instead of a 2 page report, we're getting 5 or 6 hours of video. And when you watch that video, you have to go back and forth to kind of listen for things to make sure what you're seeing is accurate and correct. And so it's just increasing the workload that was, at one point maybe kind of manageable to a point where I'm getting a little concerned about our prosecutors being able to keep up with looking at all of those videos. Of course, you have your forensic evidence in general, and then you have the defense bar, which is coming up with more and more sophisticated defenses to a lot of the cases that we prosecute. All right, so we're also looking at an increase in complexity when we're dealing with low-level criminal cases. I referred to this earlier. And it's a new initiative, well, maybe not so new anymore. I think we gave a report to the legislature in the winter of 2019, right before, I guess, the pandemic, well, about a year before the pandemic kicked in. But we called it our Early Screening Intervention Program. And it was a way, I'm sorry again for the small print, it was a way to give prosecutors who are not licensed clinical social workers, but we do deal with social issues and social problems. And so we have to figure out a better way of how do we resolve those low-level cases in the most effective and efficient manner so that, again, we don't see those cases coming back into court again and again. And so we have in 6 satellite locations pilot programs going in 6 courthouses where we have a dedicated ESI prosecutor and what we call a resource counselor. And the resource counselor and the prosecutor work hand in glove, essentially trying to make determinations about how a case should proceed. And a lot of it is service-focused. I like to call this prosecutor-led diversion. And it's prosecutors making evaluations of the case, again, looking at what's in the public interest, looking at what's in the background of the defendant, taking into consideration what your victims are telling you, and then deciding how best to use the state's resources. Because you cannot incarcerate your way out of a lot of low-level criminal cases. It just is not realistic, and I would argue not just. It's not the kind of system that we'd like to see here in Connecticut. And I'm trying to see if I can read that. I'm having a little trouble. Okay, that's the resource counselors and what they do. And then taking a look at the various considerations that go into the kinds of defendants that you see in these low-level criminal cases. And that's where we're really taking a hard look at the substance abuse, the mental health, housing issues, employment issues, and the like. So this is kind of a big deal to us right now in the division, and it's how we're addressing that problem of body-worn cameras, videos, and the proliferation of digital evidence. And we're sort of in the very beginning stages of creating a digital evidence management solution. So I don't know how many folks here are into that. There are a couple of techies that help me out with the laptop, but this is really huge. You have, 109 individual police departments that are sending videos in. Right now they're doing it on thumb drives and other disks, things that can be easily lost or maybe even compromised. So it's not the best way to be handling that evidence. I kind of look back and did some historical research, and you go back, that's about, I want to say about 100 years ago. So this police officer is outfitted with two things: a horse, if most police officers had them if they're lucky, and I don't know if you can see in his hand, he has a stick. So he's going out to do his job with no weapon other than the baton and the horse. And that's how things, were done 100 years ago. And then you move up to a little bit more advanced. Someone told me, I did not even know this existed, but that I think is Herman Munster to the left. Is car 54, where are you? All right, so everybody knows about it except me. So now we've gotten a little bit more advanced, and we see that they at least have a car to patrol in. They have some kind of a radio here, and the police officer has, I guess, an annoying partner. So they, at least, resources for police officers were evolving, more and more. Now let's compare that to what we see in today's world. So there's your sort of, your average police officer with the intercept cruiser. You've got the dash cam video. You've got the built-in laptop computer that's in the car. I'm not even sure what that router thing is in the trunk, but I think that's, for the techies here, that's because of all the computing power that your average cruiser needs to work all of those devices. And then you have the body-worn camera on the police officer's chest, and then finally you have the portable tablet where they can use to write a summons or maybe a traffic ticket. I don't know, Dad. You looking at that, do you think that's something that you would have taken to? No, I didn't think so. So yeah, police work was a lot different. I'm not exactly, I know it's for the better, but I think we're going through this period of adjustment with our law enforcement and our prosecutors, and it's going to take time for us to really hit our stride with all of this technology. But again, as a result, we've really got to focus on this digital evidence management solution, because all of these devices, hold on a second here. Yeah, all of these devices are creating digital evidence that are going to, needs to go somewhere, right? And our idea is that it should flow seamlessly from the police department, across the web into a massive cloud storage facility that is going to organize and keep very secure all of that data, so that when our prosecutor goes to access their file, right, their paper file, which is now going to be an electronic file, they'll open up their electronic file on the computer, they'll look at all of the documents that they have in the case, and they'll click on a link, and the link will take them right to the video associated with that case. And then very quickly and seamlessly, we can get the discovery to the defense lawyers that are waiting to get our documents, our witness statements, and our video. And so we can give them a link just to go and scoop up that information, a very secure link, and then they'll have to download that into their law firm system. And then we'll have completed our discovery without having to waste a lot of time and effort and man hours putting together paper discovery. So that will be a huge change for the way prosecutors handle their business. Really quickly, and we talked about this earlier, but we do look at our three main areas when making a decision on how to pursue a case. And then you have the three outcomes from obviously your conviction. The nollie is just a Latin term for the prosecutor declining to prosecute the case, and then obviously we do get some dismissals. And this just gives you a little bit of detail as to what goes into the consideration of the seriousness of the offense, the defendant, and the strength of the case. And it's all the various factors that you would see. We have our felony versus non-felony. Is there violence in the case? Violent crime gets treated a little bit differently than non-violent crime. Of course, you've got your felonies and your misdemeanors, so there's a big difference when you're looking at the level of the charge. So I thought this was important for you to see overall, and it's really the graph to the right that I think is the most important. And if you look at, starting on the left, you look at your A felonies and your B felonies, and then you go down to lesser degrees of severity based on the crime, you're going to see a higher conviction rate to the left. So for your A and your B felonies, those are your murders, your kidnappings, your arsons, you're going to see a very high conviction rate there, and you're seeing 71%. But slowly as you head toward the right, except for sort of one or two anomalies, in the category of the U felony, the unclassified felony, that's where you see a lot of drug offenses. So that's a bit of an anomaly. And the same thing when you get down to the smaller cases, the misdemeanors, all the way to the right, you've got the unclassified misdemeanor again. A lot of those are drug related. So I think this sort of plays out. The data show that this is the way it should be. You're seeing your higher amounts of convictions for your more serious cases. And by the way, this is where you're seeing your trials. Those 300 trials I referred to are usually taking place in those two areas, in the A and B felonies. So this data kind of shows what happens when you're in the system as a defendant and you're looking at just their prior criminal history. And you can see in the graph that's in the blue, you can see if you have no prior felony convictions, the percentage chance of a conviction is pretty low. And then as you go up, it gets higher and higher. And I think that makes sense. It's as it should be, because that's something that prosecutors are really taking into consideration. You're coming in with a new case. If you've got a history of prior convictions, it kind of is an indication that you aren't really trying to get yourself on the right path, and you're continuing to go down the wrong path, and we have to make decisions. We have to make judgments about what to do with your case. And then just to the right of it, it kind of shows when you're taking it, and I think that's it's either 2021 or 2020 data. I mean, it does vary year to year, but in that particular year, you're looking at your different racial backgrounds from Hispanic, Black, and white, and it was pretty even across the board. And I think that, statistically that's a bit, any other given year you might see a slightly different result just depending on, again, that densely populated areas and where the arrests are taking place. As I'm getting toward the end here, I can see a lot of you guys saying, okay, this is a lot of data for a prosecutor. But this is the coin of the realm now. This is what the policymakers want to talk to us about. So we're really focusing on it. I just want you to focus on two things on this graph. You can see what the pandemic did to caseloads. Remember earlier I said 300 trials? Look at that 2019 calendar year. You had 124,000 and change cases come through the system. 300 trials. That kind of blows my mind. And then you look at what happened in the pandemic. You look at how criminal cases dropped. I mean, people were just hunkered down, not a lot of things happening. And then, of course, you see the blip up in 2021, not quite back to where we were. But I wanted you to see that trend. And then those three arrows pointing out the 46, is that 47%? And then 59%? That gray shaded area is where prosecutors really exercise the bulk of their discretion. And those are the cases that were nollied in those years. So as a percentage of cases, prosecutors nollied pretty much half of the cases coming in. And it isn't just a decision to not prosecute. Let me just get to the next slide and we'll kind of talk about it a little bit. And this is a tool that we use quite a bit, and it's really a way to exercise our discretion, but it's also a way to achieve justice. It's a very important element. Our prosecutors. We've interviewed our prosecutors recently. We've had a couple of different projects that we've been doing with outside researchers who come in and interview our prosecutors. They remain anonymous so they can be open and frank with us. And they have been telling us that the Nolly disposition is where they really feel that they can exercise their discretion. You know, and it really goes to the heart of what prosecutors do, and because of that, it's a great responsibility. It also has to be looked at fairly, and when I say fairly, you have to look at it on an individualized basis, and it's not easy to categorize, you know, why prosecutors are deciding to nolly cases. But we've been trying to, and we also point out that convictions are not always the most just outcome in a particular case. So here is just a brief list of a lot of the reasons that we've compiled through these interviews with our prosecutors as to why, you know, they're deciding in certain cases, certain low-level cases, to nolly the case. And this is what I referred to earlier as prosecutor-led diversion. And prosecutors are working with those resource counselors in our GA courts and really requiring defendants to go out and to sort of earn their way to that nolly. And they're getting a lot of services at the same time. Now, we don't have enough data yet to understand if they're going to come back and be, you know, recidivate, you know, commit future crimes. That's the next hurdle for us, is to understand if we're really having an impact on recidivism. But those are the kinds of things that we're really focusing on, from, you know, that anger management counseling to, you know, mental health treatment, you know, really focusing on what are the root causes of what we're seeing in the low-level offender category. So just to kind of sum up, and I know I threw a lot of data at you folks, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have, but in looking at the purpose, you know, of this organization created 200 years ago, you know, it's really not all that different than why we have a criminal justice system today. You know, we're all really, you know, going in the same direction. We have the same goals in mind. And, you know, that is so that we have, you know, we live in a very prosperous and peaceful community, and and that includes having fair outcomes, and fair outcomes for everyone. Fair outcomes for victims, for society, and for defendants. So I wanted to thank you all for your kind attention tonight. Hopefully I got through that pretty quickly without boring you to death, and I'm happy to answer any questions, except if they're from my father. He's banned from asking any questions.
I just want to give you an idea really quickly of the criminal justice system. Years back, I thank for everything you've done for me and for my family. So, with that, thank you for indulging me. I'd like to get a little bit into the meat and potatoes of the presentation. So, drawing on 200 years of existence, I just wanted to highlight for folks, this is the criminal justice system circa 1823. And we actually found your emblem there with the stop thief, the gentleman on the horse with the pitchfork, and you can see the other riders trying to get away. And then on the picture on the upper right, that's the old Newgate prison. Get my, okay? Okay. So it is entitled Moving Justice Forward, the Prosecutor's Role in the Criminal Justice System. And I think before I really get into that as a sort of on a personal point, I'd like to sort of bring, I think, what is the momentous occasion that is about to happen to everyone's attention. So my parents sitting right here, you know, they don't look their ages. And I can see Mom starting to cry already. But I want to show you, take a look at that. Look at those